Mr. Srinivas Cherla from IIM-Ahmedabad.
So, good afternoon to all the delegates here. Just the presence in this August center and everything makes me feel very patriotic that I have to recognize and pay my respects to the armed forces for all their contribution before we start off. And so we'll come to the topic now on consumer perspectives on electric vehicles. So we did this study in the mid of last year, 2018, and before we get to the survey results, right, some background on it. So we can see that there's a lot of traction globally for electric vehicles, right, with many countries moving forward, notably China making a lot of headway, even to even to the extent that it's pitting against the US and Europe. But when it comes to India, though we have a very friendly policy framework and everything else, we are unable to actually make too much progress, and still the adoption is below 0.5% when it comes to electric vehicles. We have had one round of one wave of electric vehicle adoption in the early 2010-2011 time frame, but the movement didn't sustain, and then with the EV 2030 movement, we hope to actually be at par with where the other nations are. Okay. So when we undertook the study, it was primarily driven by some requests coming in from the auto industry to understand consumer perspectives on electric vehicles and factors to improve the acceptance of EVs in India. Right? So we went through an exhaustive list of 100 plus cities and tried to find tier 1, tier 2 cities to do the study. We used some social, economic, political and technical parameters to come to a short list of 10 cities, because obviously we cannot do a very large survey. We conducted one-on-one surveys with about 6,000 consumers across these 10 cities, and also did some thorough work on auditing the data, ensuring that there's no noise in the data, and it's all genuine, valid data, right? Not just relying on the interns to do their job, but also going ahead and ensuring the data accuracy. Further, we also reviewed the current state of infrastructure in all these states and cities. Right. So we'll be sharing some of the findings in the report in this study here. First, of course, is building a thorough questionnaire. Over here, we factored in attributes like the vehicle ownership, the consumer driving patterns, right? We had questions on awareness regarding electric vehicles. We also had questions on the purchase criteria, primary purchase criteria, and expectations that the consumers have towards electric vehicles, and what they foresee to be the market potential in their cities, and their expectations towards the administration and EVSE or public charging infrastructure, right? So the finalized list is given there. Most of the metro cities figured out, and among the tier 2 we had Nagpur, Jaipur and Ludhiana, right? So this is capturing a snapshot of the demographics of our audience and their vehicle ownership patterns, right? So you can see that there's no say bias towards any particular segment. It is very natural. There's a lot of people who own two-wheelers, who own sedans over hatchbacks over sedans and SUVs, and that's very clearly reflected in the survey outcome, right? Further, we also looked at their vehicle ownership versus preferred mode of travel, right? So, though a lot of people own four-wheelers, over there 1, 2, and 3 four-wheelers, we had about we particularly targeted people who own four-wheelers for this survey. So though there were a few people who did not own four-wheelers came into the survey, then even among those who own the four-wheelers, they do prefer two-wheelers for various reasons. For their personal transport use, right? And there are a lot of consumers, about 10%, who also reported that they prefer and use public transport for their daily commute, right? Despite having the convenience of going on a four-wheeler. Okay. Further, we try to evaluate the time of travel and the distance of travel. So this chart kind of factors those two in. You can very clearly see that, of course, bikes and two-wheelers take lower time to travel, and the difference between two-wheelers and four-wheelers is about 15 to 20 minutes on an average, right? And surprisingly, though, people who are traveling on public transport also reported a similar amount of time for travel as the four-wheelers, most of four-wheelers. So it wasn't out of proportion as one would have expected that someone traveling on public transport would spend an inordinate amount of time, right? And it also shows that people preferring four-wheelers are traveling more for traveling larger distances and taking longer to get to their destinations. Okay. When we asked questions on their current ownership versus what they would prefer to own going forward, it came out as a surprise that a lot of people prefer hybrid electric vehicles over battery electric vehicles. And I'll say why I'm a little surprised with this fact. But then, yes, the main thing that they factored in is the convenience that they won't be stalled, or the assurance that they won't be stalled because a battery kind of range exhausted somewhere in between. They still have the conventional fuel to drive along, right? But other thing is that Tier 2 cities showed a greater preference for electric vehicles, slightly greater preference for battery electric vehicles compared to Tier 1 cities. Okay. So further, we try to assess the awareness levels of consumers by asking them a set of questions on, for instance, reliability, on performance, on the charging time, versus what they already knew about electric vehicles, right? A overwhelming majority, of course, suggested that yes, they agree battery electric vehicles or electric vehicles are very good for the environment. There's very little disagreement there. Whereas in most of the other factors, you had about 40 to 45% people who did not know how to answer that question, right? Or would have answered it incorrectly. So the red indicates, so when I have disagree in the red, it means that they should have agreed to that. In the sense, electric cars are just as reliable. We know technically they are up there, but then people continue to disagree with that, right? So there is an awareness gap that needs to be fulfilled. So I would take the don't know and disagree and club them as saying they do not completely have information to make the right decision there, right? Likewise, if you go to the fourth point over there, electric cars have a higher maintenance than petrol cars. There are a lot of people who said agreed, whereas we very well know that electric cars do not have a maintenance issue, or their maintenance costs are pretty low, right? So again, they agree and don't know would contribute a major majority. So there definitely seems to be a awareness gap that is very clear from the survey, that 70% of the people who own cars as well do not know, do not have their facts right when it comes to electric vehicles, right? Further, we asked them some questions on cost versus time for charging, right? And this is a slightly complicated graph to understand, so I'll make my attempt to explain it here. What we did is we gave them some options for a 30-kilometer range extension, 60 and 90 kilometer range extensions. We gave them options for cost and time, right? So, for instance, when we go to a 30-kilometer range extension, what we said is how much would he be willing to pay for a 30-kilometer range extension, and if it takes him 40 minutes to recharge that vehicle, right? So, most of people said we won't pay more than 30 rupees for a 30-kilometer range extension, right? Sorry, only a small amount of people said we won't pay more than 30. Most of people, above 60%, preferred quick charging. They didn't want to wait, right? So, again, very clearly the preference is towards quick charging. And as the charging time increases, for a 90-kilometer range extension, we said you would have to wait for 120 minutes. And like, yeah, 67% of the people are willing to pay more money, up to 3 to 4 times the more money, the normal amount, to actually trade on the time. Okay. So the preference for quick charging, 60 to 70% people are willing to pay up to 3x to 4x the amount of normal charging. Okay. Further, there were questions on would they be willing to consider EVs as a primary vehicle, because most of the time we see that EV owners are having EVs as their secondary vehicle, not their primary vehicle, right? And again, yeah, it turns out 60% of the people are okay with EV as a primary vehicle. Leasing as an option has a lower preference. And there was one debatable question on, okay, should battery swapping be allowed instead of battery recharging? And most of people say yes, we are okay with battery swapping, right? So there's a lot of debate on, can we do battery swapping for passenger vehicles, what kind of standardization that would be required and other things. But it seems like people would be, consumers are okay with swapping from their preferences. Okay. Now, I think this is a very busy graphic and also a very important one, because it talks about significance of the factors versus the uncertainty in consumer responses, right? So a factor which has highest significance and high certainty will be a very crucial factor for the auto industry, right? And what we see is factors like recharging time, range and charging infrastructure, which are on the right hand and the bottom side, have figured out very prominently. Consumers, among the other purchase criteria, what the consumers are saying is that, hey, if we could resolve the charging recharge time and offer a range, good amount of range and charging infrastructure, they're not too concerned about paying more for a electric vehicle. So the price, if you look at it, is on the top left. In the sense, let me put it in a different perspective. So if given the charging infrastructure, recharge time and range are comfortable, consumers are willing to pay 20-25% more for a electric vehicle. That is how you would have to perceive it. Okay. And also the uncertainty is high in price factor, in the sense, for the same model, we gave them some flashcards showing them different specifications for electric vehicles, and for the same specification, consumers were, someone would quote 6 lakh, someone would quote 20 lakh as their willingness to pay, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty, but in these factors there's a lot of certainty. So what we have to conclude from this is that the bottom right parameters are very crucial, and so I would like to very quickly conclude draw some conclusions from the study. Of course, there's a lot more analysis done, but we had a slide limitation, and I wanted to make it very pictorial, so we just put about 10 slides over there, right? The consumers seem to suggest that lack of infrastructure is probably the single most important thing in their purchase decision. Also, this is followed by range and recharge time, right? So they had a high level of uncertainty on personal preferences like environmental friendliness, whether an EV is, and if an EV were more environment friendly, would they go for it or not? There's a lot of uncertainty in yes, no for that as a parameter for purchase decision, right? Performance, if an EV were to perform like a Tesla or something else, would they go for it? Again, a lot of people, there's a wide range of answers for that. Price as well, and availability of different variants. Today we don't have too many variants, or one or two variants actually, right? So if they had more variants, would they go for it? Again, the answer is on a wide spectrum. Whereas when we ask about the fundamental infrastructural questions, the answer is very clear. Yes, we need that. Only then we can consider anything beyond, in terms of purchase, right? So seems like consumers gave a prominence to factors out of their control, like public infrastructure, range and recharge time, which are determined by the environment, and price is something that they have in their control, how much to pay, whether to pay or not, right? So we would like to conclude giving our acknowledgements to Renault for partially contributing the study, and to Mahindra Electric, Hyundai, Tata Motors for allowing us to interact with their consumers, and to DST for their funding on the prosumer driven smart grids project, which was also used for this survey, right? Now I would like to take any questions from the audience here.
No, this is a survey you have conducted. It's a recommendation on how do we go ahead with the electric vehicles in India.
Right. So as far as the roadmap, how we should proceed with electric vehicles, there are multiple ways in which things are moving. Government is pushing for mass public transport, electrification of mass public transport, where you can see that in the Niti Aayog report as well, that the first phase is focused towards mass public transport more than personal vehicle electrification, right? Which is certainly in the right direction. Apart from that, focus on infrastructure is very crucial. That's at least what is being highlighted there. And the third factor that I would like to bring up is awareness among consumers is still very low, right? If I go back to that slide.
No, that's all right. Actually, people will come to know about the maintenance and other benefits of the electric vehicle only after they use it.
Yeah.
So suddenly it will take time. But thing is, we have to push on electric vehicles as China has pushed on. They have
So
gone.
have you taken any survey from the manufacturer, people who funded you? Have you taken their input also? How do they feel where the market, why it is not, you have taken consumer feedback?
This is primarily a consumer study.
Yeah, so when you talk about infrastructure, consumers, they are waiting for the infrastructure to come. It's a chicken and egg story. But now, when you talk about the vendors, whether infrastructure providers or the car providers, their confusion is more about standardization, because there are already 3 different standardization, CCS, TIDAMO, GBYT and all those. So,
Right.
so what standards we will come up with where everything will run, or how about the compatibility, interoperability, how do we charge? So those are in fact the very major factors which are actually keeping things people at bay, even the manufacturers. ESL tender also has not really taken off much beyond a few cars. Why? Because which connector, which this thing.
Right. And one other thing that I learned was that even though we are putting in tenders for Bharat 001, AC and DC thing, those standards are going to be obsolete pretty soon.
Yeah, because they, by the way, they are not standards, they are specifications.
Yeah.
So there's entirely different things. And the interesting part was here we come up with some specifications and then they were given to BIS to convert them into standards. No, standards are evolved first and standards are common minimum. And then you evolve specification out of them.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So I think the initial movement, the planning, the way government planned and pushed it itself was not very, very matured way. And standardization, people have to have a holistic approach to it. Once we have proper standardized framework, everything available in place, I think it will automatically proliferate. Everybody will vendors will get clarity what to produce, what kind of cars to produce, what kind of interfaces, technologies to bring in, and infrastructure people will know what kind of charging infrastructure to do, what kind of interfaces, how do they communicate with the utility. All those lot of things are still pending. Without that, this will always remain like pipe dream. This is my personal perception, but anyway.
Yeah, but this was primarily a consumer-focused study, and we did interact with a few dealerships, for instance, and took their opinion as well as stakeholder opinions. And what we realized, for instance, we spoke to the municipalities, urban development associations, and again, even among them, there is no clarity. There's some push from the top saying yes, it has to be done, but they don't have any blueprints anyway. The dealerships, they are not pushing electric vehicles because the commissions that they get on electric vehicles are low compared to conventional vehicles. Okay.
What was your sample size for this?
We did a survey of total 6,000 individuals.
And what kind of segments you have targeted? Like all the peoples were from the urban areas, or they are also from the rural areas?
No, so for an EV survey, it makes sense to pick the right audience, right? So we picked predominantly urban conglomerates or urban centers, where you have people who we would think would know about electric vehicles. We also went to many companies and offices, IT sector, SEZs, and did one-on-one interviews in offices. So it was not a survey that was done on high street in a hurry, in proper setting, with enough time given to each and every individual.
Don't you think this survey, consumer survey, was a little too premature, because when the ecosystem itself has not been surveyed, their concerns have not been addressed. You go with the consumer survey, what kind of result do you expect? Coming from IIM, I would have expected you would go to the real problems, and which you will only come to know when you talk to the vendors, the car manufacturers and the charging infrastructure organization, why they are not rolling out. Once they start, I think that might have given you better actionable insights and answers than simply consumer surveys are very, very misguiding.
Okay, yeah.
Sir,
but
I have one thing to add here. There are chargers which cost even 17-20 lakhs, like CCS Shadmo, and there are GPT chargers which cost 2.5 lakhs, which have been procured by ESR. So when such kind of variability is there, battery manufacturer as well as the OEMs who are pitching in, like Mahindra is pitching in for a low-end variant wherein the car could be made in a range of 11 lakhs itself. Now, when Nissan Leaf tries to roll out the similar kind of vehicle, that will cost them 25 lakhs, because the battery technology as well as the charging equipment itself is of 17 lakhs. So how can we have a level playing field for all the OEMs? And what is the best fit for India has not yet been discovered yet. So that has been
I think this is where what I was mentioning, standardized framework, or what all kind of standard, what technology. Once you are there, there's a clarity among the stakeholders, because everybody is bringing in their own technology. But when you talk about MNCs, okay, Mahindra is a homegrown technology, which is anyway from slow charging and low cost and all that. So we need to come to somewhere in between, right maturity, that okay, whether you are Indian manufacturer, whether you are a MNC, These are the these are the kind of things that you can come up with, and then business, market forces will play their own role. Mature things will always get adopted. Certain things will fizzle out. That's the way it works.
Okay.
And I think if we start the hybrid vehicles first, then infrastructure problem will not be there.
Right.
So that, I think India should start with the hybrid vehicles in the first week.
See, I think you already must have seen the government stance changing from pure electric to hybrid already. Okay, so I think that there's already a shift in the government stand also. So it's okay, but I think what is important for any new paradigm to come in, the ecosystem has to mature. For that, government needs to have enabling infrastructure frameworks to be there. We are a country famous for very high-flying policies, okay, being launched without the ecosystem being ready, and then we keep on struggling. For 5 years, 10 years, we say nothing has taken off. Government policies have failed. No, but then there's another flip side to this again. Our ecosystem is also so complacent that unless there is a push from the government, they don't start moving their ass and start doing something about it. There's no consensus among the industry without government push, what to go, where to go, what to do, what not. Everybody is harping their own trumpet. Whatever technology they have got from wherever, they just want to sell that, irrespective of the bringing some harmonization, bringing some standardization, making it user-friendly, consumer-friendly, cost-effective, and all those things. So that's where standardization plays a very major role.
Probably lack of innovation in our vehicle industry.
See, innovation will come, but once you have an overarching framework in place, innovation will evolve. But the point is this: if you keep on innovating first, when will you release the products?
Right.
Okay, so there's no harm. You see, the best example is our e-rickshaws.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
Government policy, they did not need any government policy, did not need anything, it just proliferated. And government had to accept it and develop policies, regulations around it. So there are certain things which come with it. Yeah, please.
No, I mean, I just want to come back to this point about the hybrid vehicles.
Yeah.
It's one side that the government wants to move the government-owned fleets, but even from the private owners, if I own a car, I don't have the options of hybrid vehicles available. Neither do the new societies that are coming up in urban areas, townships and all of that. Neither do they have charging mechanisms in the.
So this is what I'm telling you. Charging infrastructure is a major bottleneck, and charging infrastructure needs to be standardized. So standards are being worked upon in BIS, but again they are being handled in a very, very haphazard manner. I can say it with guarantee because I have been contributing member into that, but I'm very disillusioned.
But why are the automobile OEMs not pushing for hybrid cars
See, by pushing something, it does not happen. Simply by pushing, if it would have happened, a lot of things would have already happened. Hybrid cars have been Civic and Camry, they have been around a lot, but no hybrid small cars have been there. Pardon? Even hybrid SUVs. So now they're coming, but they are all again high end. All high end.
So then why
because technology is expensive.
why the taxis and these three-wheelers, e-rickshaws are going or booming in that way, and why the two-wheelers and other things are not going in that faster manner?
You want my answer?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer is very simple. Our e-rickshaws is a technology of जुगाड़. Typical Indian जुगाड़. वही आपका लेड एसिड बैटरी उठाया लगाया, वही एक देसी कहीं से चार्जर बनाया, किसी हर गली नुक्कड़ में चार्जर बन रहा है, कहीं से बिजली तार खींचा, ऊपर टांका मारा, चार्ज कर लिया, एंड वही जो पुराने जो रिक्शा जो अपना तो उन्हीं का बॉडी अपना एवरी मेरठ जाइए, कहीं जाइए, एनी सबर्बन टाउन, you have e-rickshaw manufacturers now everywhere, Bihar, you go any state. And I think last year there was an exhibition, there were only e-rickshaws available of a different kind. But the base core technology is very easy to do that.
So means customization was not the problem for the e-rickshaws there.
Pardon?
Customization of the rickshaws to make them as an e-rickshaw was not the problem.
No.
While it is the problem
There was no,
making or standardizing the two-wheelers and four-wheelers.
Yes, because that's already an organized sector. This was a new paradigm. Okay, people came up with their own designs, their own technology, their own costing, their own everything. And market over a period of time, reached some threshold and plateau where prices matured, kind of designs zeroed into a couple of variations and all those. So we have some this thing. But still, you will see in next few years, once we have our technologies matured, you will have much more efficient e-rickshaws, much more stable. Battery technologies will move to the next technology when the batteries become cheaper, but that will be gradual. Okay, but all the same, that's a classic example of no policies and still things come up. Okay.
But even in that way, consumer survey is makes sense so that the infrastructure provider and the manufacturer will able to understand that this kind of market segment is already there, and these peoples they can target when they'll put their money or investment in that direction.
Do you think they need IIM to do a survey? They have invested so many billions of rupees in there. Let me, no offense to IIM exercise, but I think every big organization has their own surveys. And by the way, I've been waiting for last 10 years to buy an e-car. I cannot buy it because there's nothing available. छोटा वाला है उसमें ना तो मैं फिट आऊँगा ना मेरे को वो South Delhi से नोएडा ले जा पाएगा. Okay, I'm also waiting for the right kind of a car to be there, and then car है तो infrastructure नहीं है. So I think these all things now. See, we have got traction now. The positive thing is, because of this policy, traction has started well. In next 4-5 years, things will mature, semblance will come, and then you will see after 5 years, within 2 years, maybe you will scale, move up like this in the volumes. Once the maturity is there, technical clarity is there, everything is there. Yeah. You want to say something?
I wanted a question for the speaker.
Yeah.
This is regarding the DST fund or under which this survey was done. Can you share more light on what was the scope of that?
Which one?
The DST's
Yeah.
fund that was utilized here.
Over there in the DST project, we are trying to develop vehicle to grid integration for peer-to-peer power trading. Okay, so that's slightly out of scope for this audience here.
You can take it offline. You can take it offline, and we are anyway running late. I've just got this thing. Can you move to the next? Thank you very much. And